How's it going, guys? Welcome to the Talk4 Podcast. So excited to have you here today and show you this fantastic episode. Just want to say quickly that episodes like this one and all the ones before and the ones in future are made possible by people who subscribe. Hopefully, just like you. I'm going to ask you today if you can leave a subscribe, leave a follow, leave a rating, leave a like or a comment, and just support the show in the little ways that you can like that. It makes a huge difference on my end. And quickly, just want to plug as well. I've taken 30 of the best episodes of this podcast and turned them into a fantastic book that goes into 150 secrets to greatness. Each one of those 30 episodes gets crunched down into 5 of the best key takeaways from the whole talk and turns them into a fantastic book. Highly recommend you check it out. Please support the show by grabbing a copy, either a paperback or an ebook. And I can't wait to show you guys this one today. So guys, without further ado, let's get over to the episode. How's it going, guys? Welcome to episode 154 of Talk4, the Quickfire podcast, where we ask 4 great questions to unique and interesting people. Behind the mic today is your host, Skupien. That's me, and let me introduce an incredible guest for today. Christian Bruhn is going to be answering our questions today. So, Christian, I'm super honored to have you here. Thanks for being up early in the morning on your end of things to do this, and on a Sunday as well. I appreciate you. But first of all, how you doing today, man? And how's life?
I'm doing great, Louis. How are you? Excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh man, I'm great. It's a Sunday, been up, been running, and been excited about this podcast. This is going to be great, and an industry I haven't tapped into before on the show. So this is going to be really interesting. So let's get people up to speed on everything that you do, and just kind of like the elevator pitch really on just the life of you. So we usually go around kind of 30 seconds to a minute and a half, roughly, just that snapshot in the life of you and the work you get up to and what day to day looks like. So yeah, hit us up with that. Then we're going to dig into it on the big scale. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. So I'm Christian Bruhn. I was born and raised in South Louisiana, Slidell, Louisiana, just north of New Orleans. At 22 years old, I realized that my life in South Louisiana needed more. At the time, I was working as a keg truck driver for Budweiser, and prior to that, I was working as a cook in the kitchen.
Wow.
What really opened my eyes is my next door neighbor, growing up, one of my best friends. His mother moved to Oregon. So one summer after he had just graduated basic training, we decided to take the trip out to Oregon to go visit his mom. And while we were there, he was really telling me about how, of all his friends, everybody he knew growing up, he thought I would be one who really gravitate towards military. So that trip really just opened my eyes to things outside of Louisiana and kind of set in motion me starting to explore the military side of things. And I went to the recruiter, and the rest is kind of history after we got back from that trip. So fast forward to at the recruiter, I was presented with an option 40 contract, which is a 75th Ranger Regiment airborne option. It had a $5,000 bonus. That $5,000 sounded good to a keg truck driver at the time, so I signed that, not knowing what a Ranger was. I went back to the hotel that night and actually gave my friend a call asking, "Hey man, what's a Ranger?" He goes, "Bro, seriously, like you have no idea." And shortly thereafter, I went to Surviving the Cut on YouTube and was wondering what did I just sign myself up for. Um, but fast forward 10 months, 11 more months, and I graduated RASP and had made it to the 75th Ranger Regiment. And from there, as an intel analyst, I went on to serve 3 overseas deployments, 2 in Kabul, one in Pakistan, Islamabad, and in addition to that, 2 DC rotations, working as a liaison on behalf of special operations. And transitioning from the military in 2021, I worked as a program manager for a company, Hawkeye 360, here in the U.S., where they focus on satellite-based radio frequency detection geolocation. I was there for a little over 2 years, and while my time at Hawkeye, I felt like I had more free time than I knew what to do with. And a lot of that was just because in the military, you live, breathe, sleep, everything you're doing. So now that I had transitioned and I'm working just a standard 9 to 5, I just felt like I was doing something wrong. Like I had too much time. I just didn't know what to do. I just felt like something was off. So I'd always had the urge to do my own thing and gravitated towards luxury watches and found a program that taught me early on how to successfully be a luxury watch trader and doubled down on that. And now we are here 2 years post starting that. And yeah, now we're here.
Fantastic. Well, I know I said it before we jumped on the podcast here, but I just want to say thanks for your service. And, I've spoken to a lot of people from the military, all sorts of branches and different walks of life on this show. And I know that the Rangers is a big deal. It's no easy gig, that's for sure. So, talking to you right now, I know that you're the real deal. So this is great to have you on the show today. I'm really looking forward to digging into everything that you learned there, the experiences, and how you've applied that into everything you're doing today then. So, I think first of all, the first thing I want to dig into in question one is just kind of like what that moment was that kind of pivoted you out of the military and got you into entrepreneurship then. So fascinating career, serving as an intelligence analyst with the 75th Ranger Regiment, becoming the founder of the Art of Time. So pivotal moment there, or any kind of like experiences leading up to that change of career path, basically then, from that transition from the military to entrepreneurship. And I guess how did your time in the military and training and experiences and brotherhood and all this sort of stuff start to shape your approach to running a business then?
Yeah, perfect. So it honestly sounded or felt just like a natural progression to go from the environment I was living, working, breathing for 7 years at Fort Benning in the 75th Ranger Regiment to now being the captain of my own ship as a young rising entrepreneur. But really, what I learned early on is everything you do is a stepping stone. Every kind of look at the end goal you want and figure out what you need to do to be able to get there and kind of reverse engineer a plan. And that's actually why I joined the military. Going back to that origin story was because I realized where I was at in South Louisiana wasn't really conducive to what I had to offer to the world.
Mm.
So I decided to really build on that stepping stone and enter the 75th Ranger Regiment. And some of the lessons I learned in regiment, I mean, it really shaped me as not just an individual, but as a man and as a leader. I turned 23 at basic training, so I shipped off to the military at 22. My last day in the military, which this is a fact I couldn't have written. My last day in the military, the day I took the uniform off, was the day General Donahue of the 82nd Airborne got on the plane in Kabul and we flew out of Afghanistan for the last time. That was the last day I was on Fort Benning.
Wow.
I spent my entire career as a counterterrorism targeter, specifically focused on that problem set. Um, and with that being said, that 7 years, I don't believe I was anywhere longer than 6 months at a given time. Stability did not exist. And I was always constantly having to learn, always constantly being elevated to learn a new position, all the way up until the end, where part of the reason I and a lot of my teammates decided to exit the military is we just feel like, from a career standpoint, you're at a fork in the road. Either you double down on yourself as an individual provider in the military, or you become that team leader. And for me individually, I really felt a calling to be that individual provider because I just like to be able to get things done. So during my time on my first deployment, or my second deployment, I should say, I was really working in the U.S. Embassy as in a liaison capacity as well as an intelligence capacity. And I started to realize that what I considered at the time liaison work, where I was acting as a conduit between both the military and the U.S. Embassy, is really what I love to do. I love to be that person kind of making that connection to solve problems between two organizations. And I started enjoying that more than the actual military work in of itself, or I don't want to say the military work, but the actual intel gathering information. So I learned there that it's like, okay, I don't know how I can become a liaison type in that professional capacity post-military, but I definitely want to try to start leaning that way. And I think one thing, not just myself, but a lot of people in the military struggle with when we exit is you don't know how to take the skills you've developed and put them towards a goal for yourself. A lot of times we're kind of bulldogs on a leash and we're pointed in the direction to go and told to attack, and we're professionals at being able to execute. But when there's no one holding that leash and directing you, there's that moment of, okay, where do I go? What do I do? And how do I actually take all of these skills I learned and put them to work for myself versus having to fill out a resume or application and try to persuade somebody to see the value in me to allow me to work for them. So that's kind of what shaped it a lot, is knowing where I'd been, what I had done, and then in the professional world, feeling like I was having to justify myself to do bare minimum level tasks. And it's like, you know what? I just feel like I want to be the captain of my own ship, kind of take things in control and
Yeah.
really show the world what I have to offer.
That's great. Really, really great backstory there. And I'd like to learn a little bit about the watches specifically. So, was that something that you were always really interested in? Were there any experiences in your time in the military as well, where you had experiences with maybe military grade watches that then sort of shaped a bit of a, maybe gap in the market or something that you saw or anything like that too? Just any experiences you had there and why you chose to go down that career path post military?
Yeah, so no, I had no interest in watches prior to the military. In fact, the first watch I ever bought myself was at the Army surplus store in Slidell, Louisiana. I went and bought a G-Shock prior to going to basic training just because I needed something. And that G-Shock went, I mean, that went my entire military career with me through Ranger School, Airborne School, SEER, deployments, I mean, you name it. Um, so that G-Shock holds a special place in my heart. It has 20 jumps out of a plane just alongside me. But when I went from that tactical environment in the military to starting working with these alphabet agencies in DC, wearing a suit and a G-Shock just doesn't go together. You want to be able to look the part, and part of being intel is you want to be the gray man. You want to blend in. Well, when you go in these environments, you don't want to stick out as a military guy. You want to be able to look like an intel professional. You want to speak the language, look the part. You don't want that initial interaction or perception for people to think differently. And if you go in there and you can tell like you're wearing a muddy watch from the field or you're not wearing dress shoes or just something's off, it raises flags and people are a little bit less comfortable with you. So I walk in and at the time I was looking at a Rolex Submariner on one of my coworkers' wrists. And it's funny because I think I'll pause right here because I think it's a great segue of this kind of shape things too, where the Rolex Submariner, the most sold watch in the world, resold watch in the world. Um, when you look at that watch, you take the richest person in the world and you take somebody who makes 50,000 a year and have them look at that watch, that Rolex doesn't change, but their perception and view of that Rolex is vastly different. And then you have the people in the middle who are buying that as the most bought and sold watch in the world. So I just like to use that as an example for how you can have something that everybody sees from a different perspective, and that's important to realize. And what you learn in the intel world is even though there could be something there, not everybody's going to see that one thing the same way. So you have to learn to adapt to who you're dealing with. Um, but anyway, going back to working there and seeing that Rolex Submariner on my coworker's wrist, it was like, okay, I need to step my game up and get away from the G-Shock. So I asked him, I was like, hey, how much is that? You know, course, he gives the 10K price, and it's like, man, like I'm on a E5 sergeant paycheck. Like there is no way I'm able to even go and get a Rolex. At that point in time, the closest thing I had to a luxury watch was my first deployment in Kabul. We sent the interpreter out into Kabul to actually go get us fake Hublots and Patek's, and he brought them back. We paid him $100, and we had some fake luxury watches from Kabul. That was just because you want to try to look the part. Now I wouldn't condone that. I wouldn't condone fakes. But back then, that's what a young Christian Bruhn did. But now in the embassy environment or in the DC environment, it's almost an expectation where you're presented, you're nice, you're walking in to present information to impressive people. So I learned very on that it would signal something that you can't signal yourself. And you realize that by looking at individuals. Like if I would walk into a room with a 4 star and he's wearing a Rolex, a Daytona. It's like, man, what does this guy know or what has he done to get a 20K watch on his wrist that I don't? It's like, what does he have or what is he able to do that I don't? And the answer is nothing. So it's like, okay, there's clearly a level of disconnect between what he's able to get and what I'm able to get. So I got to figure that out. And that's really when I started going on that rabbit hole, just looking at, okay, how do I get a watch like that on my wrist? And that opened up my eyes to the secondary market and really the business that is the luxury watch industry outside of just going to an authorized retailer and having to purchase direct from them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm curious as well. I know several veterans who have gone on out of the military to produce incredible brands and reapply the lessons that they learned in the military and in training into the business world. And they've had great effects of it, whether that was options trading or whether that's, non-profits or, loads of things there. So I'm just wondering, while we're on the subject of the military side of things too, any big lessons there that you've taken from training that you've found are really successful within what you're doing right now, or any of the kind of things that you're doing in day-to-day business operations that you've kept out of the military and reapplied into the world of business and entrepreneurship?
Absolutely. I mean, number one, resilience. One of my favorite quotes is Elon Musk talking about entrepreneurship, where he says it's chewing glass and staring out into the abyss. I feel like a lot of my military career was quite the same, where you don't really know what to expect. You just know where you're at in the present and you know what you're working towards, but you don't know how the end result will shape up. You just have to very much block out the noise and really just suck it up and trudge through when no one else is watching so that the end result is achieved and then people see the end result and think it's great. Um, so with that being said, just the uncertainty and the resilience and the ability to not know necessarily what you're working towards, but knowing you're working towards something greater. And when an opportunity arises, being able to shift gears and be fluid to kind of lean into that opportunity at that given point in time.
Yeah.
Um, Somewhat of an ambiguous answer, I know, kind of broad, high level. Um, but yeah, there are just several points in the military where you're wondering, like, why am I here? Why am I doing this? Am I doing the right thing? The 75th Ranger Regiment, it's a special operations volunteer unit. You can quit and walk away anytime. Entrepreneurship's the same way. I like to say it's a treadmill where, running on a treadmill sucks. You can step off and quit anytime. And the same with entrepreneurship. You can step off anytime and go get that corporate job working for somebody instead of putting it all on your shoulders to do. But when I look at a lot of those lessons, it's really the one that really sticks out is I'm okay with failure. I'm not okay with quitting. And I even go back to my very beginning levels of being in Ranger Regiment. I was not a runner. Like the physical fitness requirements of being a Ranger were not something I don't have a background in running or endurance, and I still don't. I was a state champion high school power lifter, 220-pound weight class. Like that doesn't equate to running 5 miles in under 40 minutes.
No, it doesn't.
Um, the first time I ever ran 5 miles was my first week of RASP. Um, and I remember being like, what the hell am I doing? And it's just like, why are you doing this? And a week prior, I was on the phone with my dad, and I would like to say we're actually filming this morning's Father's Day. So happy Father's Day to my dad, Kevin. I will be calling you later, but thank you for everything because this story and this interview wouldn't be possible without you. So thank you, truly.
That's great.
But I remember giving a call to my dad and just, you're sitting in that Ranger holdover period for roughly 8 weeks before you even start RASP. They cycle through the classes and you're watching the other class just drop people fail, people broken, limping, getting sick, just anything that can cause somebody to quit, it's happening. And you're just like, man, do I really want to go through this? Like, it's almost just psychological, just sitting there waiting for your chance, but the whole time just watching people getting broken off. And not only are you delaying starting your military career by going to RASP, because arguably you have to go through RASP to get to your unit, while everybody else we already went through training with was in their unit because we got sectioned off to go through this selection. So there's also that feeling of, man, I really just want to get to my unit and do my job, versus having to go through this continued suck that I'm just volunteering for. So I remember calling my dad and kind of just talking to him about that. And he's like, well, if you fail or if you quit, he's like, if you fail, you try. If you quit, you quit. And it's like, you're gonna end up in the same place. So might as well just try. And it's like, you're right. Like, it's all I needed. So I went through, I started trying. But even then, like the mental doubt still creeps in your mind. And that first week, they really try to break you off. Like the fallout rates of most special operations courses are within the first 1 to 2 weeks just because they're trying to weed everybody who's not mentally tough enough so they can focus on the rest of the course through who needs it.
Mm.
Um, but I remember that first week doing that 5 mile run. There's the white van following everybody. as we're doing the 5 mile. You can raise your hand. They call it VW, voluntary withdrawal quit, at any point in time. And it's always in the back of your mind that you can step off that treadmill and just go to your unit. So I remember seeing that white van getting closer to me, closer to me. And this is the first time I'd ever run a 5 mile route, not in my life, but also at Fort Benning. So I didn't know the route. I didn't know where the finish line was. I didn't know anything. It's 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, also pitch black. So you're just totally disoriented, not knowing what's happening. All I knew at that point in time is I was struggling, I was dying, and that van's getting closer and closer. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna just run as slow as I can. And when that van catches up, I'm done. I'm getting in it. Well, fast forward about 10 minutes, that van's getting closer and closer. And then all of a sudden I cross the finish line and I'm done. The van never caught me. Still failed the 5 mile, still got counseled for, I finished, I believe, in 41 minutes. But that was like, man, I mentally quit about 20 minutes ago, and then I just failed this by 1 minute. Um, and that was really a light click. It's like I had never run 5 miles in my life. I mentally quit during it. If I didn't mentally quit, I would have passed. And that realization was like I could have pushed it a minute. Really kind of springboarded me into being like, okay, you just did something you didn't think was possible. You quit the entire time. You just kept going until you crossed the finish line. And I would say that story right there, among many others, really just kind of, yeah, shifted what it means to doubt yourself, but still being able to go further, and accomplish something you know you could.
I really, really like that. It's so true. And yeah, I'm really into my running right now as well. And I've been finding recently that, you've always got that little voice in your head that's telling you to stop and telling you to quit and stuff too. But it's sometimes just a case of how can you like play a trick on that voice? Whether that's just a case of just a little bit more, or checking the time or not checking the time, or kind of playing tricks in your own head a little bit too, just to get yourself just that next corner, that next bend, or to the top of the hill, or whatever. Sometimes you've got to be creative. It's not always just going to be a case of I'm going to power through this mentally. Sometimes you've got to find, going around the outsides, under or over, rather than straight through it, right?
Yeah, you say that. And being in an organization like the 75th Ranger Regiment, it's easy to be creative and force yourself to run when some of your peers that you're friends with lose their legs and limbs and have injuries that prevent them from having the God-given ability to run. So it's like you also take health to a different level when you see that taken away from some of your peers. So definitely that's motivation in of itself for me.
Definitely. No, 100%. I mean, unfortunately, sometimes people need that shock to get themselves into gear, or have that motivation and stuff too. It'd be, I wish it was easier than that sometimes, but sometimes that's what it takes and stuff too. So, I mean, if we get from A to B, and B is, getting there mentally and powering through all that stuff, then that's great. But let's look at the brand then. So I really love, one of the things I love here beyond people's backstories is actually brand backstories too. So the art of time. Talk to me a little bit about that. Was there a kind of a creative thought behind the name there, or anything that meant a lot to you that you caused you to kind of like name it that? And also just thinking about it as well, when you start a brand like this, you got to build up a lot of credibility, a lot of trust and things like that too. So how did you kind of get started in it? Just those initial sales, building the website, the brand, where did it come from? How did you grow it to where it is now?
Well, I'll say this, it's still growing. And it's funny you ask about the brand because I'm still rectifying early mistakes for my brand name, including this past week. I just bought the domain theartoftime.com. Only 2 years too late, but yeah, everyone go visit theartoftime.com. But but how I came up with the brand name is it's actually the second name I came up with. So when I decided to lean into luxury watches, um, before it was even a thought of a business, it was really just kind of filling that void of feeling like I needed to supplement my time with that first job I had with Hawkeye 360, and just I had to do more. So it's like, okay, you want to do entrepreneurship, you kind of see luxury watches as maybe that entry level vessel to develop some business acumen. So I went in, really found a program, Watch Trading Academy. Definitely recommend to anybody who wants to learn just the ins and outs of the very beginner level of trading watches. But that's where I learned just the core skills of being able to buy and sell. And what I learned through that professional course is that's where a lot of the skills I learned in the military, I realized how much they translated to being an entrepreneur. Negotiation, resilience, being able to make an assessment and with the second and third order effects in mind. I really was like, okay, like this makes sense to me. And so I went on eBay, bought my first watch, lost $1,000 on it. But guess what? I was like, cool, learn that lesson, won't do that again. Bought my second watch. I think I made maybe 150. I was in the green, so I was happy with that. And then it's slowly just snowballing to where I learned, okay, if I actually open an LLC now, I can go get the tax advantages of having a reseller certificate through the state of Virginia to where I don't have to pay taxes through eBay or Chrono24 or other places I'm buying things to resell. So what I ended up doing is setting up an LLC so I could get that recertification. And I didn't know what LLC name or business name. And this is really where I started thinking, okay, what business name do I want? I chose Chesapeake Bayou. And that's still what my LLC is to this day. But the reason I chose Chesapeake Bayou is where I live now in the DC area, Maryland area where my wife's from. The Chesapeake Bay is big, and I grew up in South Louisiana on the bayou. So I was like, I'll just combine the two bodies of water, Chesapeake Bayou, and guess what? It's also my name, Christian Bruhn, CB. So I was like, all right, I'll go with that. So I ran with that, but then I was like, that doesn't really scream luxury timepieces, or it sounds more like, I don't know, like a t-shirt brand or something. So I was like, well, what do I really like in the luxury space? And the answer is art. Art was probably my first love growing up. It's something I did as a hobby. It's my creative side is something I still really take pride in and would put myself up toe to toe with anybody in. So I was like, you know what? Like if selling watches takes off, I would also like to have a business where I could dive into art in the future. And layered on top of that, through Ranger School, the one thing I would always remember the RIs, the Ranger instructors saying is the one resource you can't get back is time. Um, and so that kind of brought a new light to the name The Art of Time, where it's like, it's also an art. How are you going to spend your time? Versus also just the product art and the product time. So that's really where I went and got the name The Art of Time. But here's kind of a business story of mistakes, lesson learned, where early on, the first place I ever wanted to have my brand recognized on was social media. I did not have any social presence just because, as mentioned, my 20s, I'm 33 now, so I've been out of the military 4 years. But my 20s were spent special operations intel. I did not have social media presence. I didn't have Instagram. I didn't have X, Twitter. I had a Facebook I had since high school, and I had a Snapchat I made pre-military, and those were the two social media platforms I had. Social media is totally new to me in my professional life now. I created my X, my YouTube, my Instagram, my business Facebook, everything social media wise, specifically for this business. So everything's within 2 years. When I created the name, I wanted the name The Art of Time, but The Art of Time spelt regularly was taken. So I was like, okay, I'll just make the switch to having an O for of instead of the zero. So it went The Art of Time with the zero. So I decided stupidly to double down on that name and make it ta0t.com just to try to make that O stand out more. But now it's like early business mistake. What am I doing? So wrapping up the whole story, I'm still in the middle of trying to make that correct funnel for The Art of Time, which I'm now doing with theartoftime.com. But that's kind of the background for the name and how I'm still trying to rectify that early mistake of thinking it was smart to brand The Art of Time with a of being spelled with a zero versus an O.
I like it. Good story and lots to be learned there. So can you just run us through everything that you do with it then? So I obviously we've all picked up on the fact that it's, reselling of watches and stuff now, but just specifically the whole service list. So what is it that you do? How can it help people? Who should reach out? That kind of a thing. And yeah, what's some of the stuff that you're sort of trading and working with out there?
Yeah. Everyone interested in luxury watches who wants to maximize really the value they can get for their money should reach out. The whole business model really started when I was looking as a military man who couldn't afford a watch and how to get into the space. And then having my eyes open to, okay, if you actually buy right, you're not going to lose money in the long run. Like, yes. Like, for example, I actually wore this watch for a reason. So this is my Panerai 140. The original retail on this price is around 30K. Right now, you can buy it for 15. So a lot of what I do is try to show buyers that just everyone knows the depreciation on a car, but the depreciation on watches is not as known. Um, I show people that when you buy a luxury piece at the right entry point, if you ever decide for whatever reason you need to move on or you need to sell that piece, you can cash out close to what you paid, if not more. And that's what the whole business is built on is I'm not going to go into a Panerai and buy a brand new Panerai for 30K because I can go on the used market and buy the same watch for 15. And guess what? If I all of a sudden see a 20K watch I want with my 15, well, now the retail buyer is looking at my watch as 30K because they don't know the secondary market
Mhm.
pricing. So I can also trade up into a higher piece while still gaining even more value on my initial investment. Um, so that's one aspect of just trying to help optimize people's collections to where when they're actually investing their own money into luxury watches, they're not going to eat the depreciation that you would if you were to buy something brand new. You're buying after that depreciation point to protect your investment. But another thing is I offer my consignment or brokering services, my white glove service. And this is really my favorite thing to do is because the people on the other side of the deal have really become one of my favorite aspects of the business. For example, using my intel background, I went from counterterrorism targeting to now I try to target watch collectors and people who have large collections, and I reach out to let them know, hey, I'm here. Hey, I see you're trying to sell your watches. And guess what? Selling watches can suck. Like I can step in for you and do this better than you can and try to get you more money than you're able to get for yourself. Not to mention, I will come to you, take the pictures, make a premium listing, and really elevate your listing in the eye of buyers to be able to get the amount more money than you would be able to get with an amateurish looking listing. So allow me to sell this for you so I can also not just save you money on the front end, but also save you money on the back end by getting you what you actually can get for it. Now, that is on individual watches, but then we go into collections, where I do have high net worth clients, some of which have 40, 50, 60 watches valued at, some have $1 to $2 million collections. Um, Now those businessmen, you don't get collections of watches by not knowing what you're doing with your money or not knowing how to operate in the world of business. But what always amazes me is because of the difference between retail pricing and secondary pricing is when I ask these individuals who are very successful, like, how much is your watch collection worth? They don't know the answer. It's like if this was a stock or if this was a painting or if this was a car, like you would know how much this collection's worth. But you have $1 million sitting in your closet and don't know what the true value is. So I will also come in and I fly out to people's houses, bring my setup, my equipment to test the time, make sure everything's authentic, working, running. I have follow-on provisions to recommend if it's not, there needs to be any corrective actions. But I'm able to go and give people like, this is what your collection is actually worth. And if you want to switch things up, I can help you trade in or out of pieces. I can help you sell off a large part of your collection that really is just sitting in the safe and is doing nothing for you. So yeah, I manage collections. I maintain my own inventory, which my own inventory is my business. So I just constantly try to keep growing that inventory to where my business pot is growing while also bringing in more business via collectors or individuals looking for me to source them or looking for their collection to be managed.
That's great. Really great portfolio. Thank you for clarifying that. So one of the things I really like there as well was that you kind of divulged a little bit about some of the dangers of it as well. So I was wondering if you could kind of go into that a bit more in the sense of, from buyer and from seller in something like this. If someone's listening in right now and they're having that aha moment where they just remembered the watch they've had for years and they've never even thought about it in a long time, or they might want to sell it, or they may be thinking, hey, I've got a bit of spare cash. Actually, this would be a great investment to go and get something. What are some of the like death traps then from seller and buyer point of view and stuff then? And then why does kind of like having someone such as yourself kind of solve those problems? So just kind of cater it to everyone. So the death traps, and then why a service like yours would be fantastic to help them out navigate that.
Yeah, so death traps are plentiful. And I will equate it to Bitcoin, where it's as soon as it's in the mainstream news and everyone knows about it, it's probably not the time to buy. So hype is one of the biggest death traps. If there's a new release of a watch that just came out, don't touch it. Like I would not touch a brand new Rolex, because what happens is Rolex will sell to their high-end clientele first when they have their new releases. However, the high-end clientele typically don't want the new releases, so they'll put them on the secondary market to be resold. But what happens is as soon as that new release, and this goes across all brands, Omega, Tudor, whenever there's Breitling, whenever they're Panerai, whenever there's a watch that's released, that it's released in sequence and people really want to buy it, those are going to hit the market pretty quick because the people getting allocated those first already have a collection or spend from those places and probably aren't interested in keeping that for themselves. So they'll reach out to somebody like me to go sell for them safely, securely, without burning their relationship on the secondary market. But what happens is just supply demand. As soon as those new releases start hitting the secondary market, the price is going to be so elevated because nothing else is available. So I'll have people who see a new release and they reach out and they want to buy it, and I tell them like, no, like hold off 2, 3, 4, even a year, because that depreciation point isn't going to come while the hype cycle is still going on. That depreciation point is going to come about a year, 2 years. So unless you're okay eating 5, 10K loss when you go sell, I would stay away from new releases, hype pieces, and I would really focus more on time and tested models that are going to constantly have that retail interest and aren't just a current in a current phase of interest.
I like it. Good advice there. So here's another great question for you then, one I was thinking as well. So let's do it in a two-part then. So two different brackets here. But if you're a young lad or a young gal listening in right now or something, or if you're an old dude and you're a gentleman, let's say at that stage, what would you say are maybe a couple of the essentials or some of the really good brands that aren't overhyped, aren't overpriced, but have that great quality that you think a youngster should be looking at that's beyond just the scope of kind of like a Cinto or a G-Shock or something like that you had mentioned before? Something really good. What are some of those good recommendations that you'd have for a youngster? And then, as a gentleman, someone who's quite successful, what do you feel like would be the essential in the closet, in the watch box, kind of at least a few of you got to have these ones, if you want to call yourself someone who knows something about this. So anything there for us?
Yeah, so as somebody who's just getting in luxury watches, I would recommend Omega, Tudor, and Breitling. And the reason I say those three is Omega is the second leading one of the leading watch brands in the world, right next to Rolex. Their price point on the secondary market for a lot of their models in the entry level, it's hard to beat. Just for the prestige of the brand, the history of the brand, as well as I mean, the offerings in that 5K or below range that you can get, the Omega C Masters, the Omega Speed Masters, just essentials to any collection. So I always recommend those for people looking to get into it. But Tudor being the younger brother of Rolex, in a lot of people's eyes, they have the same parent company. So Rolex and Tudor have the same parent company, and just with that connection, the quality of Tudor for the price range is great, and they're comfortable, they're nice watches. They're especially on the secondary market, you can get beautiful Tudors for 2K, less than 2K. So I always recommend that as well. And then I say Breitling. I would never, never, never buy Breitling retail. And they depreciate more than most brands. But where the value for Breitling is on that secondary market because of the depreciation that the brand sees. The quality of the watch on the secondary market and the tier of price it is in that 2 to 5K range is competitive with any brand on the secondary market. So those are the three I would recommend for new individuals. Now, for more experienced people, I mean, I mean, that's Rolex, Patek, Audemars, RM, like Richard Mille, like any type of watch that you walk into a room and you don't need to say a word and people are just like, this guy did something right. Whether it's the off catalog Rolexes like the Rolex Meteorites, or I mean, there's so many high-end watches. I personally love perpetual calendars. So if you could The AP perpetual calendars or the AP open works are really, I think, some of the best watches you can get if you really want to make a statement on your wrist for if you want to celebrate your success and let everybody know you made it. Those are the watches I would recommend.
Definitely. Yeah, I've never owned a super high-end watch myself, but I've definitely noticed myself noticing people's watches. And you think, do people really notice those luxury watches on people? Like, do they know, or when someone walks in the room, do you sense that, or do you see that and stuff? And I guess the simple answer might be no. Well, you don't spend too much time looking at people's wrists, do you? But actually, I've noticed that I do actually, and then you kind of notice it. And I've just been wondering, since you've been into all this stuff too, have you noticed like a difference in how people sort of treat you, how they talk to you, and how the room sort of reacts a little bit when you walk in with something really good on your wrist? Yeah, any kind of thoughts there? Is it real or is it in your own head so much?
No, it's not real. And to be honest, I don't wear my watches everywhere. I mean, I didn't grow up with luxury watches, so I'm not a flashy person by nature. So I will say when I'm out in public, I saw a Richard Mille Bubble Watson at Home Depot 2 weeks ago. I mean, that's an insane watch for anybody just wondering. But you see something like that in a setting like Home Depot, I look at my wife and I'm like, okay, that guy is somebody. Just because he's wearing a Miami Mansion on his wrist. So it means something. And when you're at a dinner or where you go out and you see people with luxury pieces, um, you start to get a different appreciation for the finer things in life because a lot of those people aren't wearing watches just because they want a watch. They're wearing it because of that exact signal, exactly what we're talking about, what that says to everybody in the room. It's that quiet way of saying I'm successful without having to go and say I'm successful. It's an indicator. And talking about equating that back into military backgrounds, when you're making a profile of somebody, you look at indicators and just if you're looking at somebody with a $50,000 watch on their wrist, that's an indicator that that person is successful or doing something that you could probably learn something from them.
Mm, yeah, really, really great point. So let's look at the future then. So that's a big one as well. And I've noticed that, some of the people I've spoken to in the past on the podcast, a couple of them being musicians, we've spoken about how AI is going to transform things and how that's sort of changing the industry and just arts and crafts in general. And I know that obviously you had mentioned that you see this as an art as well. And I agree. I think, watches are a fantastic art and they're a beautiful thing and they should be appreciated. And they have that, that level of value that they can appreciate and depreciate in value, like vintage cars will, or art, or paintings, things like this. So let's look at it then. So you found a way to blend high-tech advancements like AI with the traditional craftsmanship of luxury watches then. So can you just kind of take us through how you see AI transforming the watch industry in the next decade, and what kind of unique challenges do you face when combining cutting edge technology with a centuries old craft? So, just what's to come? How are sort of the smartwatch revolution going to change all of this, and is that going to be positive or negative to the luxury watch industry? Do you think?
So I don't think the smartwatches will have an effect on the luxury watches. And if anything, I think they will boost the luxury watch industry. And I say that because as we get into the age of AI and digitalization, I think people are really going to start craving those tangible, one-on-one, handcraft, really just artistic pieces that anything that isn't human can't replicate. So I do see a resurgence in luxury, tangible assets such as collectibles, art, watches, cars, you name it. I think AI is going to force a lot of people to those grounded in reality luxuries versus wanting to escape into a world of digitalization. But with that being said, the main place I see AI kind of shaking up the luxury watch industry and really most industries is just making the level of entry really accessible to anybody. I just think the entry level for the doers versus the reliant people who can do for themselves versus people who want people to do for them, there's about to be a giant shift between those two dynamics. And independent companies are going to start rising more in the luxury watch space just because it's easier to run a business than it ever has been. In addition to that, I expect to see like AR virtual try-ons, where people can just put on their glasses and try on a watch. You won't be able to capture that feel, but that goes back to that in person, like, okay, we can visually see it, but how do you get those additional senses of being able to feel it? Because people love to try a watch on before they buy it, and they should. You shouldn't buy anything that you're not comfortable with, especially at this price point. So what I currently recommend to my buyers is to go to a brick and mortar store and try on a comparable piece before you buy. But with AI, that online marketing of being able to physically try on something is something I'm interested in. I'm curious to see where that would go for the entire luxury space. Another aspect I see is authentication. And I say that just scams, Rolex clones, fakes, like it's the watch industry and fakes are notorious. I see with AI language models being able to get databases. I mean, there's so much information on watches between videos, every movement's patented. You can put all of those into a language model, get a repository, and all of a sudden maybe have some type of AI authentication where it's like you don't have to send your watch into a watchmaker anymore. There can be some type of device or some type of software that is able to authenticate just based on recognition of what is known about how these models are made and crafted. And then I guess the last one I can see, and this is going way down the sci-fi route, I guess, would be having watchmaker robots. And it just kind of sounds crazy to say. But when you start thinking about that handcrafted precision, and really one of the biggest shortages right now in the watch industry is quality watchmakers. So just for example, on the secondary market right now is estimated at 25 to 30 billion dollars, and by 2030 it's heading to 50 billion. So the secondary market is in a 5 year trajectory right now, and that's in addition to the giant wealth transfer coming of the trillions I'm sure you may have heard about from just the boomer generation getting older, sending their money to the younger generation. We're in the middle of that as well. So between those two things, I really see a big shift, just for everything, just for everything. And I really see the market being flooded with watchmakers or I'm sorry, being flooded with watches and needing more watchmakers to authenticate, safely be the third party liaison to deals. Because when you start having independent dealers such as myself, you need credibility. And an authentic third party watchmaker can add that credibility. But there's too many, there's not enough, and there's not enough watchmakers right now. And it's a hard skill to, I guess, convince people to want to go learn, to be honest.
Yeah.
Um, so if there's a way for Tesla or whoever that's making these humanoid robots to craft some type of repair or authentication or just something simple, that's another aspect.
Yeah. Really good points there. So the next thing I want to get into as well is, looking at all of this as well. And if we tie this back a little bit to the military stuff as well, just looking at how in an industry like this where there's a lot of money on the line, you're buying something. If you don't know what you're doing, there's pressure involved. There's a lot of money. If you don't know what you're doing, there's that gray area. If you don't have support with someone such as yourself, there's a lot of pressure in all of that I've found. And I think there's relatability there for you as well. And if you think about, just how people in the military, they've got to deal with life and death. They've got to deal with, high pressure situations with risk where there's a lot on the line. And, someone like yourself who's in intelligence, a lot to be learned from that as well. But in a situation like this, where you're dealing with these kinds of things and you're also facing, an evolving future in this industry as well, potentially, making good decisions under pressure, managing emotions, removing emotions at times and being strategic and tactical as well. Anything from the military that you've adopted there that really helps you in kind of decision making and just basically staying calm under pressure from the military, that's really helping you with what you're doing now, that you feel like potential buyers should also adopt as well and learn from?
Yeah, just blocking out the noise and focus at the task at hand is a really big one. I mean, in the military, you learn how to get hyper focused sometimes, and that hyper focus is is it's honestly hard to get outside of the military, I've learned. Because putting yourself in an environment where I was working in embassies where you're in an office with your computer, no personal electronic devices, just your computer and the people around you all working towards something. So being able to try to just block out the noise and focus on the task at hand is really, really, really the biggest challenge. I just feel like I mentioned earlier, it's never been easier to grow a business. It's also never been easier to be distracted. So really trying to fight my own internal battles of recognizing, okay, no, like doing everything with intention is, I guess, what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
You need to be intentional. Like if you don't get ahead of your mind, like there's no one watching you over your shoulder, making sure you're doing everything right. There is no system of checks and balances. It's on you. So having that goal and knowing what it takes to get to that goal and knowing it's going to suck and knowing what's at the end of that suck is it's really just lessons, not just in the military, but just trying to focus. And I honestly think back to pre-military, even being a kid, playing baseball, where it's like I remember being 8 years old and hitting a baseball where it's like you hit a fly ball in the outfield and you're running to first base. Well, you're just staring at that ball in the air. You're not running as fast as you can because you're watching that ball in the air. And I remember even being like the coaches like, don't watch the ball, just run. And it's like from the military, even entrepreneurship anytime you find yourself staring off, watching that fly ball and not actually just focused and running to the base, you're probably going to fall short.
Nice. Good advice, man. I really, really appreciate that there. And I think a lot of people will too. Really, really well thought out. And you can see how so much of what you've done in the military shapes exactly who you've become today. And you've had to pivot, but you've done that in such a good way. And I'm curious to know as well, you know, if you think about kind of character building, trait building, leadership, and things like this too, there was obviously a few things in the military you had to embody and learn and develop and stuff to become really good at what you were doing there. And then you're obviously in a completely different industry now. So, kind of coming towards the end of this podcast, if we're talking about a bit of like leadership advice or a bit of stuff for the youngsters and the younger generation coming through and everything too, in the military, what was kind of the most important trait that you found for yourself that was most important to get you through that and excel in what you were doing? And then in the entrepreneurship side of it, in the business realm of what you're doing now, what is one of the most important self traits you found in this too? Are they one and the same from the military to entrepreneurship, or were there different things? And then are those things that people should be building as youngsters now as well? What should those things be?
Learn how to be unemotional. And I say that, and it's unemotional at the right times. Growing up in South Louisiana, I love Lil Wayne. There's a Lil Wayne quote, or I should say verse, where it says, "No emotion from a king." And in the military, you learn, especially in some of those liaison rule or environments I was in, I became the punching bag on behalf of both organizations. If the military did something that an intel agency wasn't happy with, or if the intel agency did something that the military wasn't happy with, I was the mouthpiece between both of those organizations. I was the person getting beat up and then having to relay the message. So there is an aspect of being a punching bag, and you have to be able to not disconnect, but realize that isn't directed at you. It's directed at something that you have no control over. Um, However, in entrepreneurship, it is directed at you because it is the only it's not an organization behind you, it's you. So it's the ability to be unemotional when people are really just coming down hard on you to make rational decisions. Because as soon as emotion gets clouded is when you start making bad decisions. I mean, there's stress tests for a reason where you have to remember a certain amount, like you have to remember 5 words and then go run 5 miles. And when you come back, you're gassed. All right, what are those 5 words? It's essentially just being able to push yourself past a physical or mental peak to where your mind's not there, but still remember things. And a lot of that comes down to being unemotional and just keeping a clear head. And because like when people, even now, like when I still have moments of doubt. I mean, you're making YouTube videos, I'm sure everybody does. It's human nature that you doubt yourself, wonder why am I doing this? But it's just being able to take yourself out of the emotion at that point in time and have a clear head that it's like, okay, well, I've spent 2 years building this up. I don't want this one moment of doubt to erase everything I've done for 2 years up to this point. And it's also being unemotional of just able to get started. Don't care about what people say. Don't care about what you're doing. You have to start. One one lesson I learned from my transition from the military, I was in a transition program, the Honor Foundation. It's a special operations transition program. I highly recommend any of you listening to check it out if you're in the military and want to transition. Um, but one thing I learned through that program is they make you have cups of coffee or interviews with individuals who are already on the civilian side as mentors. One thing I learned through talking to entrepreneurs who were acting as mentors in that program, not a single one of them was in the current job or owning the business they had originally set out to own. And that was a lesson that really stuck with me is it's not only the ability to create a plan, but the ability just to start doing, because as soon as you start doing something, life will take you a totally different direction. You need to be able to adapt and double down on wherever life's taking you. And you need to be unemotional about it. You just need to be able to say, okay, this is the cards I'm being dealt. How can I capitalize on this?
I really like it. That's such solid advice, man. And the last kind of question I tend to round off with as well, then, is on a kind of a personal front as well. So I think this one's going to be a big one. I'm looking forward to it. But just if you had a kind of a rewind moment to go and have that back to the future and speak to that young version of you, in that kind of 10 to 14-year-old bracket with a little bit of advice, that whisper in the ear, a bit of advice for what's coming up ahead. Obviously, you've gone through a load of different stuff. You've had to reinvent, you've had to learn industries you knew nothing about, and you've had to find success in all of them. So if you did have that moment to whisper in the young you's ear and give a bit of wisdom for what's coming up ahead, what would that look like? What would it sound like?
Yeah, the advice would be how to get started. I think that kind of ties into everything we've been discussing is really the biggest issue for entrepreneurship for me was trying to learn how to take the skills not only developed in the military but throughout life and put them towards something that I wanted to build for myself. So if I had to go back in time, it would be trying to capture the lessons I've learned through my first 2 years of entrepreneurship and really just bringing those lessons to my younger self so I could get started then now that I know this is my passion. And I mean, with most things in life, I typically regret not starting sooner, or at least things I love. So I would go back to that 14-year-old me and just be like, hey, you might not know what you're doing, but just start learning simple skills. Learn how to buy something safely, learn how to sell it, learn how to not just think about creating a business through accumulation of money, but think of creating a business through the services you can provide. Where it's like you don't have to have that pot of money to get started. You have breath in your lungs, you have aspiration and motivation. You can go carve a service role out for yourself to start creating a business that way and just really think about things differently. So that's what I would do is I would go back to my younger self and just be like, hey, this is how you can get started at your age being an entrepreneur. Let's do it.
I really love that. That's great. It's so true. You gotta like Tony Stark said in Iron Man, you sometimes you gotta run before you can walk, and it's so true. I mean, the more you think and you dwell on the idea of doing something, the more reasons you find not to do it in a way, right? Like you find the reasons why not to and the holdbacks and the what ifs and that self-doubt and stuff too. But sometimes you just gotta jump into the pool, you gotta start swimming. That's what I've always found in the
Exactly,
stuff I've done
exactly.
too.
And to your point, the what ifs and the reasons people don't, everybody does that. That's an edge. Guess what? You know that's something every single person you're competing with is having in themselves. Outlast it. Like, and that's something I tell myself too, is you look at everybody successful, just think, why not you? Why not you? That's actually a Russell Wilson quote. I remember hearing way back when his dad was talking to him about being a NFL quarterback. He was just like, why not you, Russ? Why not you? And that's kind of something I've stayed with me is every time I look at somebody who's done something great, just that thought, why not you? And there is no reason.
Absolutely. I love it. All right, man. So, I mean, that's been the four big questions, but we've always got that shameless plug at the end then. So let's direct people out of here into progressing into basically working with you then and finding out more about everything here then. So we always have the shameless plug moment, and I always like to say it's not always just about websites and social media, but just things that you recommend people go and take a look at. So obviously start off with the website where we can get in touch with you, where we can find out more, the social media presence and everything like that too. But also if you have any recommendations for, resources where you could learn a little bit more about the industry before you go and make a big decision on it or something, or where you can find a bit more about how maybe AI is going to be sort of changing things too, a bit of resources there as well, or any kind of books or resources that really helped you along your journey too. Just anything you want to promote there, take a couple of minutes and go do that. That's a great idea.
Yeah, let's do it. So, first and foremost, theartoftime.com. That is my website. That is where you can find me. Multiple forms throughout the website. You can see my current inventory. You can get in contact with me directly if you want to buy, sell, or if you're just interested in a timepiece that you don't know how to get yourself and you would like me to get it for you at a better price than you can find elsewhere, reach out to me on theartoftime.com. I'm active on YouTube. I created a YouTube channel a month ago now. I think I have 7 videos out and 3 shorts. So really hitting YouTube hard. So please everyone go check me out on YouTube. My handle is The Art of Time HQ. And that is The Art of Time is the name of the page. And The Art of Time HQ is the same handle across all socials, IG, X, Facebook, LinkedIn, The Art of Time HQ. And as far as shameless plugs of things I would recommend people to do, if you're interested in learning how to the business of buying and selling watches, I would recommend Watch Trading Academy. That is where I learned to sell watches. It's a program that already exists. Don't reinvent the wheel. Just go and follow the advice of proven professionals, a proven system, and I believe you will find the course to be very, very beneficial. Um, and as far as the self-education portion, man, I'm kind of a useless fact of knowledge. And I relate that a lot to just a lot of these deployments I would have would put myself in individual, like I would just be by myself sometimes. Oh, actually a lot of time. I would just be by myself. To where I've been able to just self-isolate and just consume podcasts. I don't really read. I don't read books. I listen. Like I'm a visual. I'm like or I'm not a visual. I listen. So I just can everything I'm interested in business, anything, any watches, anything I want to know more about in that given point of time, even if it's how to update my website or how to create the best CRM. I just go find material to listen. And that's really what has been the biggest thing for me is listening to people who have been there, who have done it, kind of tell their stories and pick up lessons from them.
That's brilliant. Well, Christian, thank you so much for joining me today for the Talk4 podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. It's been a great episode, and I've definitely learned a lot myself, and I know everyone else listening in has too. So thank you for your time in doing this. And yeah, it's been great. I really appreciate you, man. And thanks for your service again.
Yeah, thank you too, Louis. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
It was absolutely brilliant. And thank you guys for listening in today. This was episode 154. If you'd like to listen to the past episodes, go and have a look at the channel. And if you'd like to listen in for the future ones too, make sure to hit that subscribe button and spread some love by leaving a like and a comment. Signing off for now. See you in the next one. Cheers.